Living by truth, a path to meaning and growth. When you decide to speak only the truth and nothing else, you set yourself up for an incredible adventure. You won't know what's going to happen to you, and that's part of the journey. You have to let go of your need to control the outcome. You have to release your grip on how things should turn out. But when you commit to truth, the world reveals itself the way it's meant to be revealed. The result for you will be the adventure of your entire life. There's a deeper principle at work here that makes perfect sense once you understand it. Whatever happens as a result of telling the truth is the best possible reality that could unfold, even when you can't see it that way. It's like the ancient wisdom suggests: if you act in truth, then whatever order you create is good, regardless of how it appears to you in the moment. This is a fundamental ethical idea that says the job of bringing order from chaos is done properly, only when it's done truthfully. This might be worth believing, even though you'll have to pay a price for it. But here's the thing: you're going to pay a price for everything you do and everything you don't do. There's no escaping that reality. You don't get to choose whether or not to pay a price. You only get to choose which price you're willing to pay. So if you're going to stand up for something, stand up for your truth. When you start speaking your truth, it shapes you because people will respond. They'll object. They'll tell you why you're wrong, biased, or ignorant. But if you listen to them with an open mind, you'll become a little less foolish each time you speak up. If you keep this up for 5 years, you'll become incredibly tough, articulate, and able to communicate under pressure. You won't even recognize the person you've become. You'll be a force that others have to reckon with. Speaking up is never completely safe, and it never will be. But the important thing to remember is that it's even less safe not to speak. It's a balance of risks. You have to decide whether you want to pay the price for being who you truly are and stating your way of being in the world, or whether you want to pay the price for being a servant who is enslaved themselves. That second price is enormous. It unfolds over decades, and after about 20 years of that path, you'll just be a miserable person with no self-respect, no power, no ability to voice your opinions, and nothing left but resentment because everyone seems to be against you. Of course they are. You've never stood up for yourself. The solution is to say what you think, but say it carefully. Pay attention to your words. The price of speaking truthfully is a price worth paying if you're willing to believe that truth is the cornerstone of society in the most real sense. If you're willing to take that leap of faith, then tell the truth and see what happens. Nothing better could possibly happen to you. There will be ups and downs, pushback, and controversy, but none of that matters in the long run. The simple advice is this: wake up, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. That's a good place to start. When you begin to live truthfully, not just avoiding lies, but aligning your words and actions with what you genuinely see as real, something remarkable starts to happen. The chaos around you, that overwhelming swirl of uncertainty and confusion, begins to organize itself. This doesn't happen because the world itself has changed, but because you have changed. You become a fixed point, a moral center in a turbulent reality. From that stable point, everything begins to reorient itself. People notice the change. Structures shift. Even your living space looks different. It's not magic. It's alignment. When your being is in order, the world responds in the same way. That's how order emerges from chaos. Not by demanding that the world change, but by becoming someone around whom positive change becomes possible. Live as though truth matters, and you become the kind of person the world can build itself around. Let's say you go through your past with careful attention and decide to take responsibility for everything you did wrong and everything you failed to do that you could have done right. Does that change the world? It depends on how thoroughly you do it. You might say it changes the world like nothing else possibly can, and that's probably true. Ask yourself this question: what's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, and that I would fix? If you meditate on that question, you'll get an answer, and it won't be one you want to hear, but it will be the necessary one. Often it will point you toward small things, and that's perfect because small things work. When you start making those tiny improvements, real, on the ground, actual micro improvements to things you know are wrong, you'll improve unbelievably rapidly. This isn't some casual self-help advice. If you don't organize yourself properly, you'll pay for it in a big way. And so will the people around you. Start where you can start. If something announces itself to you as needing repair, and you could repair it, then fix it. If you fix 100 small things like that, your life will be dramatically different. When you expose people voluntarily to things they're avoiding and afraid of, things they know they need to overcome to meet their own goals, they get stronger. If you can teach people to stand up in the face of what they fear, they become more resilient. We don't know what the upper limits of that growth are. Ask yourself, if for 10 years you didn't avoid doing what you knew you needed to do, what would you be like? There are remarkable people who come into the world from time to time. There are people who discover over decades-long periods what they could be like if they truly became who they were meant to be. If they spoke their being forward into the world, they get stronger and stronger and stronger. We don't know the limits to that growth. We simply don't know how far a human being can develop. The truth to set you free, but there's a catch. It destroys everything in you that isn't worthy as it sets you free. That's a process of burning, and it's painful, because you cling to what you shouldn't be. You hold on partly out of pride, partly out of ignorance, and partly out of laziness. Then you encounter something true, and it challenges everything. You know this from your own experience. When was the last time you learned something important that wasn't painful in some way? Often you look back at your life and think, I really learned something there. I wouldn't want to go through that again, but it really changed my life. Sometimes an encounter with truth can be devastating. You might never fully recover from it, but occasionally something comes along that straightens you out, and a lot of your old self has to go. A lot of you has to burn away. The idea is that everything about you that isn't worthy should be put into the flames. Life isn't fair. The world isn't constructed to hand you justice on a silver platter. But here's what matters. The world does respond to who you are. There's a kind of truth that shows itself not in facts but in the way you act. There's objective truth, the kind you find in a laboratory, testable and repeatable. But there's also practical truth. What works? A sharp axe is more true than a dull one. Not because it describes the world better, but because it functions better in the world. Human beings had to figure out how to act long before we understood the objective nature of reality. That wisdom got encoded across generations, shaped by selection and survival. That's why you don't just throw away ancient traditions. You update them through your life. You realize the timeless patterns within your own experience. That's your moral obligation. The past is like a corpse, but it's a living corpse. Those of us who inherit it aren't destroying each other completely because it still works partially. But it's not alive enough. If you're not awake and alert, it will fall apart. What does this mean practically? It means you rescue the valuable wisdom of the past and make it live again. You live out the ancient ideals not by copying them exactly, but by embodying their spirit, by voluntarily taking on the burden of updating what it means to live rightly in the here and now. What happens when you do that? Chaos surrounds you. You step beyond what you know. You stop saying what you don't believe. You aim at something high and you tell the truth. Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because it's right. And then the world responds, not necessarily with material rewards, but with depth, meaning, and alignment. You become someone people can rely on, someone who can carry a burden. When you're like that, opportunities come your way because people trust you. Relationships become real and meaningful. Even though you will suffer, and you will suffer, you find something stronger than happiness. You find peace, not the peace of control or the peace of ease, but the peace that comes from knowing you're living in truth, aiming straight, and doing what you can to be better tomorrow than you were today. And that's enough. Life is hard. You're suffering and drifting, and you have your reasons. It's no wonder you might think life is meaningless. Those feelings deserve to be taken seriously. You do have legitimate reasons to feel the way you do. But despite that, there's more to you than you think, and you know that too. Because you criticize yourself for not showing it. You know perfectly well you could be far more than you are. And you don't know what the upper limit of that potential might be. Start with this basic question. Can you take care of yourself? Can you be someone reliable? Maybe someone others can depend on. Your family, your community. No one knows how far you could go with that kind of foundation. That's what people admire, not catastrophe, not someone who's useless to themselves and dangerous to others. You admire people who carry a burden, who make things better, who take responsibility. That's where meaning comes from. Do the small things you can, the humble things. Put yourself together in those tiny, embarrassing ways that are real and concrete. If you do that enough, you strengthen yourself, and that works better than anything else. People approach others all the time with similar stories. I was in a pit, addicted, lost, with no direction, miserable. Then I started telling the truth, taking responsibility, fixing my relationships with family, aiming at something worthwhile, and things got better, way better. It's remarkable how often this happens, and it's incredibly encouraging because it shows that when people humble themselves enough to confront their suffering and act properly, that small spark of potential starts to expand and expand and expand. there's good reason to believe there's no limit to that expansion because in some sense we're this strange combination of finite and infinite. No one knows exactly what the limits are, but they're certainly far beyond where most of us start from. What's the antidote to suffering? It's not happiness, it's not ease, it's not pleasure. It's meaning. And where do you find meaning? In truth, in responsibility, and in aiming at the good with everything you've got. If you decided to live by truth and aim at the highest good, if you staked your entire life on that principle, who could you become? No one knows for certain. But imagine what miracles we could accomplish if enough of us tried.